Did you ever think in the early days of Bitcoin that you'd be in Las Vegas at the Venetian Casino, 50,000 people for a Bitcoin conference? It's obviously indicative of how far Bitcoin has come.
Right.
Did you believe that it would actually get to this point?
Well, in the sort of 2013 era, Bitcoin felt riskier. Like, people will look at other people that bought Bitcoin earlier and say you were lucky. But it felt super high risk, right? So there was a time that Bitcoin fell, it ran all the way up to $1,300, and then it fell towards 200. People were starting to get scared. It dropped below 200 and thought it's all over. Level of user interest, the institutional interest, the price level, all these things were things that people were unsure would happen or thought would happen decades into the future. And it's happened a lot sooner than we would have guessed, I think.
The fact that Larry Fink is on TV saying that Bitcoin could become the global reserve currency because of the United States debt, it blows my mind.
I mean, it's actually a good example because, he's not just selling, he understands it and he's coming to believe it over time, right? So that's not something that you would necessarily expect. You would expect that people would want to sell what the customers wanted. That's the Jamie Dimon, JP Morgan is like begrudgingly, oh, you can buy Bitcoin if you insist kind of thing, right? So that's selling because people want it, but Larry Fink is actually, presumably personally invested as well. Of course, everybody has a kind of roller coaster experience participating with the Bitcoin market, so it's not without its kind of drama and scares, different bands and roller coaster market effects. It takes some getting used to. The Bitcoin investors are kind of survivors, right? Because it's very difficult to trade and invest with this kind of volatility for a typical person. And I think many people who end up owning Bitcoin they're not necessarily somebody who's been trading stocks like on a personal basis or professionally before, and that's already in a kind of emotional roller coaster. Dealing with stocks and the volatility is like 10 times less or less than that, right? So it's definitely a kind of aggressive learning curve for volatility.
Where do you think we are in the evolution of self-custody being accessible to everyone? Because obviously in the early days, even for me in 2016, it was self-custody. You can't trust the exchanges. You saw hacks, all these problems, which you still see. But obviously the exchanges have worked exceptionally hard to add some sort of security features, and self-custody is still terrifying to a lot of people. So where are we sort of on the evolution of self-custody being accessible to everyone? Or do you think that actually most people will end up with a custodian or an exchange?
Well, I think the ETFs are an accessibility thing, right? It makes it easier for more people to get access. Some people, the way that they interact with savings and investments is they call their broker or their advisor. So the ETFs give them a way to do that. But it does give them an on-ramp, right? They can learn about Bitcoin, then they can buy a hardware wallet, they can do some storage, kind of grow it over time. So it's a kind of safe starting point, I guess. And I think ultimately, as long as a decent proportion of Bitcoin is in activist investors' hands, they will guard the ethos, if you like. And ultimately, different custodians and ETFs are, have an obligation to their shareholders or the unit holders of the ETF. And if they do something on a policy basis the users don't like, they can sell it and move to another one. And so you have a kind of implicit market threat that if they don't do what their users expect them to do, they'll lose their assets under management.
So where do you stand then for your average person who's just starting, whether they should take that deep dive to self-custody, whether they're ready for it from the very beginning, or is that just sort of the natural progression of going down the rabbit hole?
I think it depends, on your technical experience level. If you're IT, you understand that kind of stuff. I think it's always good to try the experience, at least with a bit, to have some self-custody coins, and then you can change it over time.
It's still terrifying. Do you still find it scary ever?
I mean, it is a crazy thing, right? That you can store these words on a steel plate, and this is, savings.
Is there any situation with this level of adoption that does concern you? Governments becoming too involved, hoarding too much of the supply, becoming miners, and potentially controlling a meaningful percentage of the hash rate?
Well, I mean, there are some more levels to go in terms of seeing how well the Bitcoin incentive scales. It's scaled really far, and it seems to work so far. The incentives are holding together. It's enabling bigger companies, bigger entities, public companies, governments to participate so far. So indications are that can continue to be the case, and basically wholesome, dependable money incentives are beneficial for the economy and for society.